Lucy, it's so great you're here. So great. Thank you, Lucy, and good evening, everyone. In 1984, what's now this organization was made up of 4 lawyers who were paid $8,500 a year, who were dealing with death penalty cases all over the South like medics on a battlefield, running from one to the other. We traveled to some of our cases in a car that had been given to us by the homeless shelter. And you know you're on sort of the lower end of the philanthropic food chain when you're getting donations from the homeless shelter. I was crying in my beer to one of my friends in Washington, D.C., and saying, we've got all these cases, we don't have any money, I don't know what we're going to do. And he said, you know, you should call Palmer Singleton. Palmer already had a great reputation even then. That was in 1984, as I said. He had been in the Prettyman program at Georgetown. I knew that he was there. I had known about him. But what Steve Milliken told me then, he said, all you need to do is keep him in pipe tobacco, and I think everything will be fine. Truer words were never spoken. I called Palmer. He was a public defender in Milwaukee, and I asked him if he would give up the job that he had there in Milwaukee and come down and help us out because we were desperate and we needed help. And we didn't have any money to pay him, but we could keep him in pipe tobacco. And he came in a car that was packed so tightly that there was just barely room for Palmer to get in front of the steering wheel and drive it down. It was amazing. He drove from Milwaukee to Atlanta. He sailed a lot. He had been a merchant seaman for 5 years before he went to law school. He asked me about whether or not he could sail any. I said, well, you know, Atlanta is the name for the Atlantic Ocean, so, you know, you'll be fine once you get here. He was a little disappointed when he went to Lake Lanier, but, you know, he sucked it up. Not long after he was here, we were having a hearing in federal court in the Russell Building, and Palmer told me he thought he had a stroke. It turned out he had had an aneurysm. It ruptured in his brain. It was misdiagnosed at first, but finally, correctly, he spent 2 days in brain surgery at the University of Chicago, 2 full days of being awake in brain surgery. He was away from us for almost a year after that, but he came back. He had a problem with seizures now. He was sort of regaining his footing after this incredible trauma that he had suffered. In 1987, the 11th Circuit had said that Tony Amadeo could be executed even though Joe Briley, the prosecutor in the case, had told the jury commissioners to underrepresent black people in the jury pools. It wasn't discovered until a couple of years after Tony's trial. And the Georgia courts and the federal courts said that it didn't matter, the fact that the jury had been rigged. And Palmer wrote a petition. We were really, at the time of Tony was to be executed, we had lost in the 11th Circuit. There's nowhere else to go except to the Supreme Court of the United States. And Palmer wrote a cert petition, which was granted. And we argued the case that spring. And Thurgood Marshall wrote an opinion for all 9 justices, giving Tony a new trial. And we resolved that case ultimately. Today, Tony Amadeo is the operations manager of a ranch in Texas. He doesn't just work at the ranch, he runs the ranch. At age 18, he was so beyond redemption that the legal system said he should be eliminated from the human community. He graduated summa cum laude from Mercer University, and as I said, he's now working there. That spring, March, Palmer and I represented a man named Marion Albert Pruitt in a death penalty trial in Jackson, Mississippi. It was not a sympathetic case. We spent a lot of time with Lewis and Mary Sinclair there, kept coming and going to Jackson, having pretrial hearings, having interlocutory appeals, all sorts of things. Ultimately, a case that no way you could ever get anything out of that case. It was so bad. I'll just say it ended with a very surprising sentence of life imprisonment based upon the mitigation work that Palmer and others had done. There are many cases, there are many things that he did. As Terica alluded to, Palmer was a very colorful character. He smoked a pipe, usually juggled 3 or 4 pipes at once. He would pull a pipe out of his pocket and then put it on down here, and then he'd pull one out again and put it in, and he was always sort of in a cloud of smoke. You know, people got sort of sensitive to smoke at some point in our evolution. So we had an office for Palmer with an exhaust fan, so that, you know, hopefully the pipe smoke would be pulled out into away from everybody else in the office. And the other thing, of course, that everybody who knows Palmer knows is that Palmer loved dogs. At any one time, he had anywhere between 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 Malamutes and Huskies at his home. He ran the Malamute Husky Rescue. Palmer and I rescued a dog one time. I don't know how I got involved, but we did. And you would see Palmer in Grant Park and in other places. He'd be there with his dogs. He'd have them all on a leash, and they'd be pulling him around. And there were all these people, and they all knew each other. They didn't know each other's names, but they knew the names of the dogs. It was amazing to be there, and that sort of community of people that Palmer was a part of. There are many cases, and sitting down to prepare a case, whether it was for trial, whether it's for motions hearing, whether it's for oral argument at some appellate court, you could not get a better analysis, a better sense of the case, a better idea of what you're going to expect, of what you've got to be ready to respond to. Palmer saw things that nobody else saw. And he was such an amazing, not only in his own cases, but cases that other people had, and people that came to see us at the office and would want to talk to us before their argument at the 11th Circuit or before their trial or whatever it might be. He was an amazing, brilliant lawyer. He was the best friend a person could ever have. We will miss him, but we will never forget him. And so much of what this organization accomplished in the last 35, 40 years was because of Palmer Singleton.